Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to be here and finally go through some of these questions and get this all bundled up in terms of what you really need to know to participate in the North American Sustainable Plant Program. I know I've been lucky enough to speak with a bunch of you individually, but here we'll try and give a good overview of the program, and then I will leave plenty of time, of course, to answer your questions at the end. So there are three main things that we want to cover today. The first is to understand that there are two goals of participating in this program, so we'll cover each of those. The newest aspect is, or the newer aspect related to the newer tracking tool, is related to information that's required to create an industry average EPD. So we're going to talk about what special information is needed in order to participate in that part of the program. And then this is going to be a real hands-on kind of learning module where we'll actually go into the spreadsheets themselves. I'm going to show you, what goes into certain cells, and we'll walk through it from the perspective that you've already, somewhat become familiar with the tools. You've probably begun to at least ask around, if not collect some of the raw data in the plants. So the idea is that now you kind of want to know what's next. Where do I really put things? And so that's the perspective that this presentation is coming from. So let's start with a real brief overview of the Sustainable Plant Program and how it originated. So for your information, if you don't already know, the Sustainable Plant Program was launched by the Canadian Precast Concrete Institute in 2012. So that industry group has a couple of years of data that they've been collecting. They've got 10 or 12 different plants that participate. And so what they've done is they've taken the original version of the tracking tool, modified it to allow participation by PCI and NPCA, who's adopting the program. And really what that has done has transformed the program into the North American Precast Concrete Sustainable Plant Program that we're all familiar with. The main impetus for the program stems from the research that was done and published in 2013 by these same three industry organizations, which was the LCA study that we did that was published in 2013. So what we learned was that during the cradle to gate or manufacturing phase of that LCA study, we learned what were considered environmental hotspots in the precast manufacturing phase. So what were the areas that were most greatly impacting the environmental impact of a building from the manufacturing stage? So that's kind of where this program originated. The original goal, the overarching goal of this program, was to improve the environmental impact at our manufacturing level. So, the precast industry in general has always been kind of on the cutting edge of different technologies, and so it made sense that this would be something that was embraced within this industry quicker. And what we quickly learned is that there was a real correlation between improving your environmental impact and reducing costs, because tracking a lot of these things, tracking a lot of the energy and materials is making you more aware of potential waste in your manufacturing processes. And so we learned that it could be a real benefit to your business practices by more closely monitoring your manufacturing. We also wanted to create a culture of sustainability within the industry. Really, we firmly believe that precast concrete is a great high-performance, sustainable solution, and so we felt that it made sense for the industry to embrace sustainability and promote it to the market. There's a few things you want to make sure that aren't confused with the program. The program itself is not intended in any way to replace requirements that you may have, local or federal requirements that you may have related to environmental aspects of your processes. Mainly what we want to do is give you a tool that you can track your own improvements. So in this program, we will, take these quarterly benchmark reports from each plant, and confidentially we will put them into a report. And because you know what your numbers are, and you can see the confidential numbers of everyone that participates in the program, you can have a pretty good idea of where you stand related to the rest of the industry. And what that does is it helps you realize, if you're either really good, you of course would want to promote that most likely, but if you're not as good, it may require you to look a little bit deeper in your manufacturing processes and ask yourself, what is it that all these other plants are doing that we're not doing? And so it's really good for improvement within your plants. So again, the tool is for you guys to measure and implement changes. As you already know and have looked at, I'm sure, the software tracking program that was developed by Athena Institute is Excel-based. So it makes it kind of easy. Once you become familiar with the program itself, the software, it makes it really easy for you to track numbers from quarter to quarter. So that is where the program originated from, and what it has evolved into is that we realized that we could evolve this tracking tool into a tool to help us create an industry average environmental product declaration. So the program now has two goals. The first is the same that it's always been. We want to track and benchmark these different environmental indicators such as global warming potential, total primary energy, and water usage in the precast plant. And so by entering your quarterly data, that is converted into these environmental impacts, the global warming potential, total primary energy, and water use. And that's what's reported in our quarterly benchmarking reports. But also, the same type of data is required to be collected from all the plants to create an environmental product declaration. So some of you may have heard of these. They are starting to become implemented into the sustainable rating systems such as LEED, and Green Globes, which is under revision, will award points for products that have these. They are becoming an alternative path, prescriptive path within both the IGCC and ASHRAE 189.1. So by using products on your project that have these EPDs, you can meet requirements, prescriptive requirements in both of those codes. And also some owners, we've heard, are requesting them even to bid on projects. So some of the more forward-thinking owners out there, think, Apple or Google, they're asking for these in order to bid on a project. So increasingly being used or requested in the marketplace. And the general scope, just to give you kind of a picture of what we're looking at, the general scope of what we're tracking is really those things, only those things that a producer has some control over. So we're tracking the amounts of materials and energy and water that are coming into your plant, any transportation that you use, and then energy, materials, and water that are used within the plant itself, as well as any outputs that you have, waste, or air emissions or emissions to water. So we are only tracking those things which you have some control over, and realizing that once the product leaves the manufacturing facility, we don't necessarily always know exactly what use that's going to be put to, or how long that building or structure will be in place, or there are several other factors that we don't have control over. So we're focusing only on the manufacturing side of things with this program. So let's get into the two different goals and the differences in what data is being collected or being asked to be collected for the two different goals of this program. As we mentioned, the software, which was developed by Athena, in the tracking portion of this program, just the straight up North American Precast Concrete Sustainable Plant Program tracking portion, there are 3 sheets that need to be filled in. And those are the first 3 tabs that you will find on either of the spreadsheets that have been circulated to date. So you have your welcome and how-to slide or tab, the cement sources, and the plant inputs. So if you do not want to participate in the environmental product declaration, you just want to do the quarterly reporting of your usage, you only have to fill out those 3 sheets. So you've probably, seen this before, of course, if you've opened up the spreadsheets at all. So on your first sheet, it's pretty easy and self-explanatory. So what you have to put in is any information that is required for you to enter. The cells are colored yellow. The background color is yellow. So on that first sheet, the main thing you have to do is fill out the plant number that you were assigned by PCI when you signed up for the program. You were given a plant number that's in the 2000s. So you need to select the correct plant number, and then you select your reporting period, whether you're doing the annual 2014, which would be for the environmental product declaration, or one of the quarters. You can choose quarters 1 through 4 in 2015 and going forward, of course. So the next tab we're going to talk about is the cement sources tab. So this is the one where you're entering all the cement that you're purchasing in a quarter into these cells. So what you're going to do is, again, the yellow cells, you'll fill out the amount of short tons for the different cement sources that you're receiving cement from for your plant. And it'll be in for that quarter. So you'll see that there are different places that you can fill in for whether you're using Portland cement, a Portland limestone cement, which is more common in Canada, but some of you may be able to use some of this, or some sort of pre-blended cement. So those are all available on the second tab, the cement sources. And then on the third tab, we basically have 4 different boxes that we have to fill information from. So on the version 2 spreadsheet, you'll notice that these were not pre-filled, these types of products. These types of products we will talk about more a little bit later in the presentation. These 4 product types are what were decided by the industry of how we want to group products for environmental product declarations. So what we didn't want to do when we developed the rules for creating these EPDs, we didn't want producers to have to create a separate EPD for every single type of product that they manufacture. You didn't want to have a separate EPD for hollow core and double T's and sandwich wall panels, and the list goes on and on. So what we did was we looked at the similarities in environmental impacts related to the different product groups, and we were able to group them into these big categories. These big categories I will define better as we go on further, but just so you know, these are now pre-filled in the EPD spreadsheet. So if you are using the EPD spreadsheet tracking tool, these are pre-filled. If you're using the version 2, you would have to fill these in for yourself. All right. The next, on that tab 3, the plant input, the next table that you have to fill in is basically all of the materials that you purchase. So everything that comes into your plant in a quarter is getting listed on this sheet. So you have to aggregate, excuse the pun, you have to aggregate all of your information for a quarter and enter it into these amounts based on the units that are pre-selected here. So you have the option to change these units. There are options for those, but whatever the unit is that you select, you have to enter the amount in that unit, of course, or else the math won't come out all right. I'll discuss a little bit later what to do if you have more than one source of fine aggregate or of any of these, in any of these categories, if you have more than one source, because further to the right of this column, there are requirements for distances. So I'm actually going to exit out of this for a second and pull up the spreadsheet itself for a second. So you'll notice that for all of these materials, what we need to know, in addition to the amounts of the materials that you're using in a given quarter, we also need to know the one-way distance from the material source by transportation type. So you'll see the main transportation types are truck, rail, ocean, or barge. And so we need to know that information so that we can accurately calculate the emissions related to the transport of that product from the raw material source to your plant. So that's why that is needed. You'll notice also, since we're in the spreadsheet right now, in each row there is an X, a red X. And as you fill in information, that changes. So see how it changed from red to orange as I began to fill in? What you have to do is fill in all of these cells, whether they're 0 or not. Once they're all filled in, then you get a green check. So if you're missing, when you've, going through and you're filling in all of your information, a final check that you can do is to just run along this column and make sure everything's a green check. If it's not, something's missing. Another thing to take note of is these values here, these are imported from your cement sources tab. So the information that you put here will automatically fill on this tab in rows 30 through 32, according to the Excel. So you will notice that as I hover over the cell, notice the cell has a little red triangle in the upper right corner. Any cells that have that mean they have a note. So if you hover, it will tell you, for example, cement totals cannot be entered directly here. So it's telling you you have to go back to the cement sources tab and then they will automatically fill in. Likewise, down here, in terms of SEMs and the fly ash, these is just more of an informational note. So this is saying that they care about how much you use. The fly ash or the silica fume itself doesn't actually carry an environmental burden, but the transportation distance that you have to truck it from, or barge or rail, whatever, it does matter. So you have to make sure and fill these values in. And likewise, this one on the steel anchors, it says it really includes we call it steel anchors, but it really includes all your miscellaneous steel that is included in the precast. Okay, so rather than go back to the PowerPoint, I'm just going to scroll down here and cover the other two tables that are on this sheet. So the table C covers all of your energy consumption. So what you need to do here is gather up your electricity bills and total for your quarter what the amounts are for these different types. You'll notice that if your plant is progressive enough to have some sort of on-site electricity, you know, depending on the different renewable sources type, we have a place to include that as well. So this will still show, in terms of environmental impact, it'll still show a value in terms of energy that you use, but the influence on the environmental impact is significantly reduced, obviously. We also include all the gas, natural gas, diesel, heavy fuel oil, and any liquefied propane gas. So all the fuels that come in, whether it's to heat your facility, whether it's for curing, whether it's to run equipment that's on, you know, on the grounds of your facility, that all gets totaled and entered in this table C. And then finally, we're also tracking solid waste. So the main difference here is that you have to tell both where the waste is going to. Is it going to landfill? Is it going to be recycled? Or is it going to be incinerated? The environmental impact of a waste that goes to those three different facilities is very different. And then also you'll notice that we ask for hazardous waste versus non-hazardous waste. We don't necessarily define what a hazardous waste is. We assume that you will use your good judgment, and anything that you have to report to the federal government as a hazardous waste would be considered a hazardous waste for these reporting purposes. If you don't have to report it to anyone, then, and you don't have a special permit, then it's considered non-hazardous waste. Kind of as easy as that. Okay, we'll go back to the spreadsheet now, or the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, so we've covered the materials table, the energy table, and the solid waste table that are all on that third tab, the plant inputs. There is a fourth tab that's on both spreadsheets. Well, it's not the fourth tab on the second spreadsheet, but this tab is included. These EP measurements are included in both spreadsheets, but this tab is not mandatory in any way. So this tab was created basically when CPCI rolled out their original program. They provided this tab and this tool for their producers to use if they felt that it was useful to them. So, oops, excuse me. So on this tab, what you do is basically answer a bunch of yes or no questions related to what sustainable practices that maybe aren't tracked in the program that you have in your facility. So it's just a tool that you can use. You do not have to fill it out. It's not a required tab for participation in the program, but some producers have found it useful. So if you get a chance and you want to take a look and you want to use it in your plant, feel free. Otherwise, it's just there. It doesn't have to be filled out. Okay, so for this first goal of the program, if you're tracking, yes?
Emily, we had a couple of questions that before you went on, I thought you would be able to address.
Okay, sure.
Sure. Some of these items, such as steel anchor and net consumables, are confusing. How do you know the mileage if you have several suppliers?
Okay, so we're gonna cover what to do if you have several suppliers for those in another couple slides. But basically, for example, for the steel miscellaneous pieces, you would total the weight of all of those pieces, and that gets included in that first tab. And then for the different suppliers, you have to do a weighted average of the distance. So that's a separate calculation that has to be done because we only allow one entry in that row. And so I have a separate little spreadsheet tool that I've developed that I'm happy to share and send out to people that helps you calculate that distance of what's supposed to go in there. Because we only allow one row, and you can't modify the spreadsheet. I hope that answers the question.
Excellent.
So we'll cover it more, yeah.
Perfect. Another, if I have 100 tons of cement from barge, it would get a high mileage. But say we use 10 of the 100 tons, would that not skew the report? Would purchase, not usage, be better?
You do the amount that you purchase in a year. So what you're entering is the amount that you're purchasing every year. You're not entering the usage. So what we do is when you total it, and then you have the amount of product that goes out, we'll know that the amount that goes into the product, that is the product that's leaving your facility, versus the amount you purchased is not the same. And so we will basically look to see if that will be a question that will come back. So if there isn't a mass balance on your facility, we'll know to either look, okay, is that in waste? Did the rest go out in waste? Or is it stockpiled on site, which is very, very common. So that will just be a question, a clarification that we will make and note in the report when they do the final EPD.
And one more, for materials shipped,
okay.
Pardon me, for materials shipped from overseas, do we also have to include the ground transportation from point of origin to shipping port?
Yes, you have to include everything. So you would have to include the truck or barge from the original facility to the overseas ship, the ocean vessel to whichever port here, and then say it comes by train from that port to your facility. All of that has to get included, yes.
Okay, Emily, thank you very much. I will allow you to continue, and we'll see if any more questions come in.
Okay, great, thanks. So just to summarize, the first goal of the tracking program, you need to fill out your data quarterly. And this data is due to PCI 30 days after the end of the quarter. Of course, because we just rolled out the program, we're asking that the first quarter data for 2015 is in by June 30th. And then the second quarter data, which would be April through June, that will start the 30-day requirement. So the second quarter data will be due July 31st. If you're just participating in the Sustainable Plant Program, you only have to fill out those first 3 sheets that we just covered. But if you want to participate in the industry average EPD, we're going to need more information from you. And that's why the newest version of the spreadsheet that was circulated not long ago, maybe 10 days ago, has more tabs. So let's talk about if you want to participate in the EPD. There are 7 sheets on the EPD tracking survey. The first 3 are the same that we've already seen. So you're collecting the same data with just a different time scale as you were previously, that we've already talked about. So I will not cover those 3 sheets again. The other 4 sheets are broken down by the product category that I briefly mentioned as we got started. So those 4 product categories are structural, architectural, insulated architectural, and underground. I have a slide that describes each of these products in more detail. Structural products are basically exactly what you would think they are. They are products whose main function is to have, carry structural loads. They're frequently conventionally reinforced or pre-stressed or a combination of both. And they include many of the products that are very common in the industry and what you think of in terms of precast. For category B are the architectural precast. So these would be the things that typically would have special finishes. They would use maybe special aggregates. Their main function really is to have a nice aesthetic finish. The third category, which seems, maybe not intuitive that it would have its own category, are the insulated precast products. The main reason that we separate the insulated precast products out from the straight architectural and the straight structural is that the insulation itself actually carries a pretty significant environmental burden. And so we couldn't just lump the insulated products in with the others because it would skew the results. So we have to separate out the insulated products in this product C. And then D is more what we would consider kind of your bread and butter, most likely not pre-stressed products that are manufactured. And some PCI members manufacture all 4 types of these products. Some of them maybe only one type. So it's up to you to determine which of these categories you have products that you produce in. So as I mentioned, and we'll go over the different product types, those are also included on the tracking spreadsheet. But what we need is more detailed information for each of these product types and to be able to create an EPD. So when you're filling out the spreadsheet for the EPD portion, you need to fill the information out on an annual basis. So we need to know, on the cement tab, we need to know all of the cement that you purchased in 2014. On the plant inputs tab, we need to know all of the materials, energy, and waste in 2014. And then on the individual tabs, we'll break down the different product types by the amount of materials used, which we'll cover. The thing about an EPD is that we only have to create it every 5 years. So it is a little bit more painful to gather all of this data, and especially to break out the materials by product category, but this only needs to be done every 5 years. So it's a one-time pain for 5 years of having one of these EPDs that you can use to bid projects, and hopefully will give you an advantage in winning projects. So these, for each product type, A, B, C, and D, there's a separate tab. And what I'm going to do, I have on my slides the opening slide for each of these, but I think it's easier to go back into the spreadsheet itself. So as I mentioned, this is the EPD Survey spreadsheet. And for the EPD, you would again fill out your plant number. You would keep the reporting period annual, and it's 2014, of course. Your cement sources, again, these looks exactly the same as the first spreadsheet, except the amounts you're going to fill in are an annual amount for all of the amount of materials that you purchased in 2014. The plant inputs tab, again, is for 2014. So you'll notice here are our four different product types. Notice there's a note that explains exactly what should be included in that product type. So what you're going to do is you're going to calculate the amount of short ton of each of these different product types that you produced in 2014. You're going to enter on tab B all of the materials that you purchased in 2014. And in C and D, you're going to enter all of the energy that you purchased, sources in 2014, and the amount of waste that you hauled out in 2014. So plant input is still for the entire plant. What we need to do, though, is on these four other tabs is be very specific about the amount of materials that went into these specific types. So what you have to do is you have to go through your records, and for all of the structural precast products, again, note that they're listed here. We tried to list them a few times so that you could remember which products need to be added together. So you actually need to go and figure out how much Portland cement was used in all of your structural precast products in 2014. And you have to do that for, you'll notice, the entire materials table is in here. What you'll also notice, though, is that the energy and waste is not. So this tool will calculate for you. It will break out the amount, it will allocate the amount of energy used to each product type based on the total production. So that math is done for you behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about it. What you do have to worry about, though, is the materials that go into each of these different product types. So these are all, the table B is the same, but you enter it for the different product types. One thing to note, I know that this can be very overwhelming, and especially if you're using a lot of different mixed designs. One thing to note, a good rule of thumb, is that you want to be most accurate, you want to be very accurate on three things. Those three things are the amount of cement, the amount of aggregate, and the distance that that aggregate is traveling, which of course is coming from this here. But those three things, the amount of cement, the amount of aggregate, and the distance that aggregate is transported, are the three most influential things on your environmental impact. If you don't want to completely get down in the weeds in terms of your chemical admixtures, I would say estimate it. So for chemical admixtures and your miscellaneous steel, you can estimate it. You can say, okay, well, approximately 50% of my admixtures go into structural. Just estimate it. And then what you're going to want to do, and there's no place to really do this, but you'll want to make a note of that. And so when you send this spreadsheet in to Dean and I, you'll want to make a note of any items that you had to estimate. And if you get to a point where you're not sure if you should be going through the trouble of calculating versus estimating, call me. Just call me and say, hey, I'm trying to get down to the 10th decimal point on the amount of corrosion inhibited admixtures, and I'll just tell you, don't bother, But if you think about it, there are some things that really influence the environmental impact, and those are the things that we want to make sure that we're most accurate on. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so that will obviously take you some time. If you have a plant that, I know there are some plants that manufacture at least 3, maybe all 4 of these product types. So I know that that is going to take some time, but it is important to truly capture the environmental impact of these products. And when we go through the process of creating this EPD, we need to be able to justify that the data that we use to back up the numbers is accurate. So with that, I've gone over the 2 goals pretty high level. I'm going to go now into some frequently asked questions and tips. So these are all things either I may have mentioned already, but I want to make sure and emphasize, and I wanted them written down for when you get a copy of this presentation or when you review the recording. Or it's a question that maybe you haven't gotten into the spreadsheet too far, but other people have asked me, and most likely asked me more than once. And so you may have the same question, and so those are the things that we're going to cover. Alex, should I check? Do you have any questions coming in right now, or should I just go through these and then ask for questions? Okay, I'm going to go through and we'll see if we have any questions. So one of the first questions I got is what we should be tracking in terms of raw material usage. So basically it's everything. Anything that you buy and use in your plant, even if it's an auxiliary product, things that don't go directly into the product need to be tracked. So to give you an example of what this looks like, excuse me one moment, I have to open my folder. Okay. Okay, so this is an example of one producer. This is what they had to do in terms of collecting this data. They basically went to accounting, and based on the accounting system in their plant, they pretty much did a data dump of everything that was purchased in the plant. And then what this particular producer had to do was go through and group and add some of, the information that was required on the input survey. So you may get something that looks like this, and what you have to do is go through, add them up manually. You'll note that this particular producer did the adding in this column, and then any conversion of units to get from, say, pounds to tons. So you'll note here in this tab what this producer was doing was adding up all of their rebar and dividing it by 2,000 because they were tracking it in tons or pounds, and it needs to be entered in tons in the spreadsheet. So this then is the value that that producer would enter in the rebar row of their plant. Likewise, for energy, a similar thing happens, right? So you have to, from somewhere, get all of the information, all the fuels that you're using, usually requires the fuel bills, all the fuels that you're using, and then aggregate them either for annual basis, 2014, or the quarter, depending on what you're collecting it for, and entering these numbers into the tracking spreadsheet. So that's just kind of an idea of what one person had to do. Okay. Okay, so what is included in the transport data? And this is a question that we did already receive, but it's the transport distance from your material supplier to the plant gate. So if there are multiple forms of transportation, you need basically gate to gate. So you need to know how many miles, you pretty much need to know the route that those materials traveled. Hopefully, a majority of your materials are just, you know, trucked down the road. So it's not, shouldn't be too burdensome. But especially for architectural products, if you have some really specialty aggregate they're getting from some corner of the world, it may be a little bit more intensive to try and track down what those distances are and the modes. So is fuel usage data for on-site use only? Yes. So when you're entering in the tab, the plant input tab, the amount of fuel that you're using, that is only fuel that's purchased on-site. And the reason for that is any fuel that is used to transport raw materials from your raw material supplier to your plant gate is calculated by those transportation distances and the modes. So we're already capturing that. So this is only fuel that you're purchasing to use on site. Okay, which spreadsheet should I be using? So we covered this a little bit. If you're participating in the industry average EPD, you have to use this Sustainable Plant EPD Survey sheet. If you're doing just the tracking, the quarterly tracking, you can use either sheet. If you've already entered the data, if you kind of got ahead of yourself, or ahead of us rather, and entered data in the first 3 tabs of the old spreadsheet, you should be able to copy and paste that data over, because the tabs are exactly the same. The tabs are exactly the same. It's just you want to make sure that on the EPD survey you're entering annual values, not quarterly values. On the plant input, what products go into table A? So this is a remnant from if you were using the version 2 spreadsheet that didn't have those product types entered in yet. Those will be the 4 product types that we've talked about at length now: the architectural, structural, insulated architectural, and underground products. In the newer spreadsheet, those are pre-filled, as we've mentioned. But if you're using the older spreadsheet, those are you still want to track for those 4 product types. If you have more than one source of a material with different locations, what do you fill in? So to do that, you have to do a weighted average. And this is what we were talking about before. So in this example, and I'm happy to share the spreadsheet, and I might actually just have Alex send it out with a link if that's possible after this. So what you need to do is, say you're getting your sand from 3 different sources, source A, B, and C. These sources could all be different. They could all be the same. I mean, no, they can't be the same. They have to be different. But you could have only 2 sources, or you could have, several sources. You enter the amount that you're getting from each source and the distance. So if this can get complicated because you need to do the distance separately for each mode. So what you basically have to do is not do a straight average. What you need to do is a weighted average, and that's calculated here. This is what the formula looks like in Excel. It's basically a sum product. So what you're doing is you're multiplying each amount by its distance. That's what this does. And then you're dividing by the total amount of tonnage. And that will give you the weighted average distance. And this would be what you include in the survey. You don't want to, that's why this is red, you don't want to just sum the distances and put that in. That wouldn't be accurate. You want to do a weighted average of the distances. Like I said, I'm happy to share the spreadsheet. If you have more sources than this, you can always just add more rows and make sure that your formula is collecting all of the information. Okay. Okay, where do we place the steel plates? This, I was showing you that there was a informational box that pops up that says you have to put it in. As I mentioned, if you aren't sure where something goes, just email me. It's no problem at all, and I can tell you where it should go. But some of the rows do have a little tick mark that will explain in better detail of what should be included there. We only have 1 meter for our utilities. Should we estimate how much goes into each product? No, as I mentioned, the spreadsheet does this for you based on the mass of the product. Splitting the data into the different product categories is going to be tough. Is there a way to estimate? So this is what I was mentioning. The cement amounts, the aggregate amounts, and the transportation distances are the most important. Those really need to be right on. Admixture amounts and hardware can be estimated. You need to note those, though, and pass that on to us so that we can make a note in the report. And if you don't know whether something should be actually calculated or estimated, call me or email me, and I will tell you what to do with those. One of our plants uses concrete that's manufactured off-site. What should we do? You still need to figure out all those quantities. They're basically going to be your raw material supplier. And so you have to still fill in all those, all the information. Okay, so here's a summary, but I'm going to skip real quick to the questions because I know that we only have about 5 minutes left, and I'm assuming there are some questions there.
There are some questions.
Alex, are there any questions?
Yeah. Okay. I'm confused whether it's usage by purchases. You seem to now be saying that the report says to enter the amount used. Can you please clarify?
So the amount of plant data, the plant input tab, that is going to be gathered from the amount that you purchase. So you're going to be tracking that data. That's going to be pretty close to what you're using. Most people aren't buying a ton of stuff that they're not using in a given year. When you get to the specific products, you want to make sure that exactly what's being used is being captured in those tabs A, B, C, and D. So what we'll realize from that when we do the mass balance is that the amount you purchase is going to equal the amount of product that goes out your gate plus the amount of waste, plus if there's anything left, that's going to have to be stockpiled. So that's how we're going to be able to do the mass balance.
We noticed there is no category for sandblasting material. Is that not taken into consideration?
Sandblasting should be taken into consideration, especially because it has a significant environmental impact. That one, though, I would need to look and see where exactly that we should put that in the spreadsheet. So perhaps, Alex, if you could give me that person's contact information, I can follow up and track that down for them.
I'm sorry, Emily, I've got another question. We use insulated that is not architectural. Does it go under structural or does it go architectural insulation?
If it has insulation, I would put it under insulated, even though it's not an architectural panel. The main idea in creating the categories was to capture the spike in environmental impact that happens due to the use of insulation. So if you have a product that's insulated, I would group it in category C with the insulated products.
Can 2014 EPD input be submitted for the sustainable plant data?
That's kind of a hard, so they're really two separate things with two separate tools. If you're welcome to only submit 2014 data and have your information published with the EPD and not participate in the Sustainable Plant Program. If you only submit data for 2014 and not for the first and second quarter of 2015, you will not be listed as a participant in the Sustainable Plant Program, but your data and name will be included in the EPD.
Okay, Emily, that clears the queue of the questions. If you have any other questions, please type them into your questions pane.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone. Please feel free to call me or email me anytime. Usually I will be able to email back responses much quicker, so I've put my email address up there, but also do feel free to call me anytime. I've also put up Dean's information, as well as Ken, who all of you probably know because he's the one administering the program in terms from PCI. So with that, I'm finished, so I can give it back to you, Alex, if you want to close out.
Excellent, thank you very much. Questions that were not answered during the presentation will be answered via email. Again, if you have any questions after the webinar, please contact one of the individuals on your screen. Thank you for attending. You have a great day.